was released in 2010 and was again directed by Jon Favreau. The film starred Robert Downey Jr. and was in a universe that was finally established as the MCU after Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk. So we were all really excited as fans of the first movie and just comic book lovers for this new upcoming Iron Man that was coming out in 2010. However, it wasn't on par with the first one. And it's not even that good of a movie. Now, if you guys follow my channel, you know that I really didn't like the last two DC films. You know that. And usually when I'm negative towards a DC film, the argument that is always in the comments is, oh, you're just a Marvel fan. You just like Marvel, that's it. You decide to hate on this film because you like Marvel and that's it, you're so biased. But that's not true whatsoever. I acknowledge that Marvel has made some really not so good films over the past years. Iron Man 2 is a perfect example. I don't like this film. I will admit there are some good scenes of action in this film, but in regards to the other MCU films, it's my least favorite. So, why don't I like Iron Man 2? Let's get into that in this analysis review. Iron Man 2 starts off 6 months after the events of Iron Man. It's established that Tony Stark has gained more fame as the superhero Iron Man, and it's explained in this film that he has privatized world peace. Okay. How did you do that? It's never really explained how he did that over the past 6 months. He just says, I've privatized world peace. But it would have been really interesting to see how he did that. Like, how did you do that? That sounds like a movie on its own, really. That would have been a far more interesting movie than the one that we got in Iron Man 2. Like, in the opening scene, you see newspapers of what Iron Man's done, and that's cool. But wouldn't that have been really interesting to see Iron Man do all of this stuff instead of reading newspapers on the walls? That would have been a movie. That would have been something I would have watched. Iron Man going country to country trying to stop terrorists of mimicking his Iron Man suit. That would have been a really interesting mission for Iron Man, but instead we get this movie where he is dying and he's trying to stop this illness, but instead of really kind of stopping the illness, he gets drunk and he is piloting the Iron Man suit, kind of equivalent to a drunk driver. And that's one of the many flaws of this movie, is the setup and the characters, including Tony Stark in this film. It's so hard to be behind Tony Stark in this film because he's doing some really dumbass things that I just do not agree with whatsoever. In the first film, you were behind him. You recognized that he wasn't a perfect character, and you recognized that he was trying to be a hero at some points. But in this film, he does a lot of dumbass things. He gets drunk, he pilots the Iron Man suit, he almost like kills people at a party really by blasting his repulsor blasts. And I get it, they were trying to do what they did in the comics with the Demon in the Bottle storyline, but I feel as though that could have been done better. If you wanted to do a story like that, maybe you should have done a separate film where Tony Stark is trying to adjust in his new life as Iron Man and how the fame gets to him and he resorts to alcoholism. That would have been a really interesting film. Not necessarily the routine superhero movie that we've been accustomed to, but a really interesting film overall. But no, because this is an Iron Man movie, we had to be presented a villain in this film, and that villain is Mickey Rourke as Whiplash. Mickey Rourke in this film, I don't really like this villain. I'm sorry, I really don't like this villain. Because all this villain is the son of a guy that used to work with Howard Stark. And he's kind of jealous of Tony Stark because he has the Iron Man suit. And he thinks that his family should have been the one to benefit from the arc reactor that was created by Howard Stark and his father. Okay, if you truly think that, then why don't you just create an arc reactor of your own? Your father did it with another person. And you also share your father's intellect, his knowledge. So why don't you both come together and make an arc reactor in Russia and sell it to the Russian government? That would have been also a really interesting story. Iron Man versus Russia. That would have been cool. But no, he decides to make this arc reactor suit where he has whips and decides to go to a random race where Tony Stark is having a midlife crisis and decides to drive a car. How he knew he was going to drive a car, I have no idea. But he gets on the track and decides to be a dumbass and takes on Iron Man and goes to jail. One of the things that I will admit about this movie is the action sequences are really good. I really like the action sequences, and that is one of the things that I enjoy about Iron Man 2, is just watching those sequences and the new modifications to the Iron Man suit. However, they're not that long. They're not that long of sequences. They're actually like maybe a minute long, a minute to 5 minutes long, and I wanted more of that in this movie. The first Iron Man was very successful, so we should have gotten more and more of the Iron Man sequences in this film. However, we just didn't get that whatsoever. They are improved scenes, I will admit that, but I feel as though a lot of it just focuses on Tony Stark, and I know that sounds very close-minded, but I really just wanted more Iron Man in this film. Another villain that was in this film was Justin Hammer, played by Sam Rockwell, who basically breaks Mickey Rourke out of jail so he can make him Iron Man suits. And that doesn't work out because, you know, you're working with a villain, Mickey Rourke. So why you thought that would work out is beyond me. I have no idea why. And that's a majority of the reason why I just didn't like this film, was the characters and their stupid motivations. This film does have weak villains. Whiplash is just jealous. Justin Hammer is also jealous. He wants to make Iron Man suits because, you know, Tony Stark has an Iron Man suit. He wants to make Iron Man suits. He's just a copycat. It was interesting to see kind of an evil version of Tony Stark. Sam Rockwell, I think, did a pretty good job with that, but we don't get anything else besides that. This character doesn't go high and beyond like Tony Stark. He's just a copycat villain persona Tony Stark, really. Let's talk about Don Cheadle as Rhodey in this film. I was kind of sad that they didn't bring Terrence Howard back. I don't know what disagreement or if there was anything that happened between him and Marvel, but he just didn't come back. And Don Cheadle is pretty okay as Rhodey in this film. I love the opening line that he has in the courtroom scene where it's like, hey, it's me, I'm Rhodey, get over it. The courtroom scene in this movie is actually really noteworthy. It shows Robert Downey Jr. yet again as Tony Stark. He is a troll, he is a rebel. He has established that the Iron Man suit is his, he does not want to give it away, and he wants to use it for world peace. But the US wants to collect the Iron Man suit, which is totally believable. I believe that, okay, if we have like this rich narcissist dude who has an Iron Man suit, if I was like a government official, I would want to take that away from him, because what if he like turned evil one day? Like, that was totally understandable, and I like that theme in the movie. Which leads up to Rhodey taking the suit from Tony at one point, and he becomes War Machine. And the last scenes in the movie, I will admit, were the best scenes of the movie. The ending, really, where we see these fight scenes happening with all the drones, the robots, and seeing Iron Man fight with War Machine gave us our first little glimpse of what the Avengers could be like. However, the last scene with Iron Man and War Machine fighting Whiplash is, I don't know, it just feels really anticlimactic. It's like maybe 2 minutes long, and all they really do is shoot beams at each other and make an explosion, and that just kills Whiplash. Like, that's it. That's all they had to do. There just really wasn't much to that scene, and it just felt really anticlimactic to me. And I was just hoping for much more. I mean, I know we got a lot of action with the drone scene, but it was only a minute long, really. This movie definitely felt like it was just a movie that they wanted to make happen and establish that they were making the Avengers movie. They were just like, okay, let's make Iron Man 2, and then we can go on to the Avengers. That really does feel like what this movie is. It feels like it's just setting up for the Avengers. A majority of movies before the Avengers did that, I will admit that. But Iron Man 2 definitely has the most heavy amount of Easter eggs and setup for the Avengers movie, really. And I feel as though that's why it was my least favorite of the MCU films. And even though that it feels like this movie is setting up for the Avengers, one of the many things that I did like about it was Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. They introduced her in this film, and she is such a badass chick in this movie. And her introduction is subtle, but at the same time, we wanted more from her. We wanted to see more from her after seeing her kind of little cameo in this film. The action sequences are great. I really like the action sequences in this film, but how they were set up and presented to us was poorly done. But watching them on the screen was the best part about this film. I really enjoyed the visuals in this film. The story and the characters, however, are what bring it down. Iron Man 2 is my least favorite MCU film, and it was actually very hard for me to watch this a second time. I wanted to watch these movies again so I have a clear understanding of why I like or dislike them. I wanted to revisit them, but Iron Man 2, I did not want to watch Iron Man 2. It was so hard watching it a second time, and it's really one of those movies that you can only watch like only once, really, because it's kind of stale. So yes, guys, that was my review of Iron Man 2. The next review is going to be Thor. Thank you guys so much. I am Corbin Stuckey, and this is Pixel Talk.